I stood at the counter clutching a crumpled eviction notice in one hand and a few crumpled bills in the other, just another day of trying to get by. The clerk, her voice barely a whisper, broke the silence. "You can't leave." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut, but they weren't just an order, they were the beginning of something far worse. I watched her hands tremble as she looked at the screen, then at me, with eyes wide in shock. This social security number belongs to a child who died in 1991. Dead. It was like the floor dropped out from beneath me. My heart raced as the atmosphere in the room shifted. The quiet hum of the building now charged with something dark and heavy. A silent alarm strobe began flashing on the wall. The world tilted and I couldn't breathe. How could this be happening? Everything I thought I knew about myself, every label, every assumption, was it all a lie? The words hit me like a freight train. "You were kidnapped from a park in 1991. I froze. My mind scrambled to make sense of the chaotic swirl of information. Kidnapped. How, why? And then, as if the universe decided to pile on, he spoke again. "Your real family. They've been looking for you for decades. They're rich, powerful. They made their fortune in Texas oil." I couldn't process it. My real family, I'd spent 32 years believing I was nothing more than the unwanted stepdaughter of a small-town sheriff. I had scrubbed floors, waited tables, dodged eviction notices. I thought I was trash, a mistake, a burden. How could this be real? This wasn't supposed to be my life. "My name is Mr. Sterling," he said, breaking through my storm of thoughts. "I've been sent to find you, Noah." I blinked at him, still trapped in disbelief. My real name. Noah, not Mara. It was a name I'd never heard before, but somehow it felt familiar, like a missing piece that had just been slotted into place. He slid a file folder toward me but didn't open it. His fingers rested on the cover, his touch oddly gentle. I could feel the weight of that file as if it contained more than just paper. He hadn't read me my rights. He hadn't spoken in an official tone, yet his presence was commanding. He didn't need to. The very air around him felt heavy with purpose. "This is a photo of you," he said softly, opening the folder. Inside was an age progression photo of a young woman. The face was so familiar, it was almost like staring at my own reflection only. Not tired, not worn. She looked loved. I had never known love like that. "This is what you would have looked like if you hadn't been taken." I couldn't breathe. It was like a key turning in a lock I had been unknowingly picking at my entire life. Suddenly everything, the pain, the confusion, the cruelty began to make sense. All those years I'd thought Richard, my stepfather, hated me because I was a bad kid. But that wasn't it. He hated me because I was a crime scene. I was the missing link, a stolen treasure discarded and hidden away. My whole life I had been a secret. I wasn't just a girl raised by an abusive man. I was someone else's daughter, someone who had been loved and lost. And now this man, this stranger, was offering me a lifeline. "Your parents," he continued, "are waiting for you. They've been waiting for 3 decades. The words didn't seem to fit together. Waiting for me. My real parents. The ones with the money and the power. How was I supposed to believe this? But there was no denying it. A knot of something hope, disbelief, fear tugged at me. This was my chance to escape the prison I had been living in. And yet as he spoke those words, I could feel something else lurking in the background fear. It was the fear of what it would mean to leave behind the life I'd known, even if it had been a lie. "You're safe now," Sterling said, as if sensing my hesitation. No one can touch you here. Safe. But was I? How could I be safe when everything I knew was a lie? As Sterling's words settled into my mind, I couldn't help but replay every moment of my life, trying to make sense of it all. How had I never seen the truth? The cruelty I endured, the endless days of silence, the cold words from Richard that cut deeper than any physical blow. I had always assumed it was just the way life worked, that some people were destined to suffer, while others were born with everything. I thought I was unlucky, that I was the burden, the mistake in a world that didn't have room for me. But now as I sat there, the pieces began to shift into something else, something darker. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just abuse. It was deliberate. Richard didn't hate me because I was a bad kid. He hated me because I wasn't his to control. I wasn't his blood, and that terrified him. He had made me small, made me feel small, so I wouldn't ask questions, so I wouldn't notice that something was off. All those years I had been treated like a ghost, a shadow in the background of his life, never good enough to sit at the table with his real family, always shoved into the corners, the laundry room, the place where the unwanted went. He'd built my world out of scraps and guilt, and I'd believed it. I had believed it with all my heart. I had spent years internalizing his cruelty, thinking I deserved it, thinking I had no right to demand more. But now I knew. Richard had been grooming me not to be his daughter, but to be a victim. He had kept me close, kept me broken, so I wouldn't realize what I was, what I could be. I thought back to all the times Richard had told me how lucky I was, how he was the one who had kept a roof over my head, fed me, clothed me, how he had saved me, how he'd made me feel like I owed him, like I had to be grateful for every scrap he threw my way. I remembered the days when I was younger, sitting in the corner of the kitchen while he and Bianca ate their meals at the table, laughing, joking while I ate the heel of a loaf of bread, the last remnants of a meal that was never meant for me. I had believed him when he said that was all I was worth. I had believed him when he said I was lucky. But now I understood. It wasn't charity, it was control. He had never been my savior. He had been my warden. He had made me believe I was nothing so that I wouldn't ask questions. He had buried me under the weight of guilt and shame, convinced me that I wasn't worthy of anything better. And for years I had believed him. I had walked through the world always looking down, always apologizing for existing, thinking I was nothing more than the unwanted, the forgotten. But now sitting in front of Sterling, a man who knew the truth, a man who saw me, not as a burden, but as someone worth finding, the weight of all those years began to lift. I wasn't just a girl in a broken system. I was Noah Hayes, a daughter who had been taken, hidden away, and forgotten, and now I had a chance to reclaim that life. But it wasn't just about finding my real family, the ones who had searched for me for decades. It was about breaking free from Richard, from the man who had kept me small, from the man who had stolen my future. I wasn't that scared girl anymore, the one who cowered in the corner, afraid to ask for more. I wasn't the girl who had begged to come back inside on that rainy night, clinging to the hope that Richard might let me in. I was someone else now, someone stronger, someone who had finally realized that I wasn't broken, I wasn't a mistake. I was a person who deserved better, and I was finally ready to take it. The realization hit me harder than anything Richard had ever done to me. It wasn't about escaping my past. It was about reclaiming my future. And for the first time in my life, I felt a spark of something that had been buried for so long. It was hope. Hope that there was more for me out there. Hope that maybe I could build a life where I wasn't defined by the mistakes of the past. Hope that I could finally be free. For a moment, I actually believed I was safe. The cold, sterile office felt like a sanctuary, like I had crossed over into a new life, where I could finally breathe without the weight of constant fear pressing down on me. Mr. Sterling, with his calm, steady presence, had promised that no one could touch me here. I could almost believe it, almost. I reached for the phone, ready to call the parents I had never known to begin the journey back to a life I'd never imagined. But then the door didn't just open, it exploded inward. The sharp crack of the door slamming against the wall sent a jolt of panic through my chest. I barely had time to react before 2 uniformed deputies stormed in their boots, pounding the floor like thunder, their hands already on their weapons. They moved with precision, like they knew exactly what they were doing, like this was something they had done before. And then the one person I had never wanted to see again stepped through the door, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. Richard. But this wasn't the Richard I had known, the disheveled man in cheap flannel shirts and stained jeans. No, this was the sheriff. He stood tall, his uniform pristine, the star on his chest gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. His eyes weren't filled with rage this time. They were empty, cold, dead. He didn't even glance at the deputies. His gaze was fixed on me, his eyes hard, like he'd already decided what was going to happen. And then his voice, low and unyielding, cut through the tense silence. "Step away from the suspect." The words hung in the air like a threat. Sterling stood up immediately, his movements swift and deliberate, positioning himself between me and the deputies, a wall of calm in the chaos. "This is a federal investigation, Sheriff. You have no jurisdiction here." Richard didn't flinch. His eyes remained locked on me, his expression never changing. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, slamming it onto the desk with a finality that made my stomach drop. "I have a warrant signed by a county judge 10 minutes ago. Grand larceny, felony charges." He pointed at me with a finger that had poked my chest 1,000 times, growing up the same finger that had made me feel small, worthless, every time it made contact. "That woman," Richard sneered, "stole $50,000 worth of diamond jewelry from my wife's bedroom before she fled this morning. I'm taking her into custody." I couldn't breathe. The lie hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I hadn't been anywhere near his house. I hadn't even seen him in years. But the lie didn't matter. He had come here to take me, and nothing I said would stop him. I tried to speak, to deny it, to scream the truth, but my voice felt too small, too weak against the onslaught of the situation. "That's a lie." I screamed the words, escaping in a rush. "I haven't been to your house in years." Richard didn't even blink. "Save it for the judge," he muttered and nodded to the deputies. "Cuff her." One of them grabbed my arm with a force that made my shoulder twist, the pain shooting through me like a lightning bolt. I cried out, but the deputy didn't release me. His grip tightened, and the cold steel of the handcuffs bit into my skin. The world around me became a blur of shouting and movement as Richard pushed forward, chest to chest with Sterling, like he had something to prove. "Careful, agent." Richard's voice was low, dangerous, like a snake ready to strike. "This is a state crime, exigent circumstances. Unless you want to obstruct a felony arrest, you'll step aside." The calculation in Sterling's eyes was instant. He knew the law knew Richard had just played his hand. Richard had weaponized the bureaucracy. I could see it in the way Sterling's jaw tightened, the way his eyes narrowed. He couldn't start a shootout with local law enforcement over a property crime warrant. Not in a federal building. Not over this. The deputy yanked my arm again, pushing me toward the door, and I stumbled, unable to keep my footing. Richard's grip on me was unrelenting, and his voice, harsh and cold, whispered into my ear. I told you never to dig." His breath was hot against my skin, his words like poison. "I told you to leave it alone. Now you're going to die in a holding cell. You'll hang yourself with a bedsheet before your rich parents even touch the tarmac." The words were meant to break me, to force me back into the frightened girl I once was, the one who had begged for scraps, who had believed every word he said. But they didn't break me. They only made me more determined. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the scared little thing who had let Richard control her. I wasn't the mistake. I wasn't the burden. I was someone else now. Someone who had finally realized that Richard wasn't my savior. He was my captor. And as he dragged me toward the door, I let that realization burn inside me, stronger than any pain he could cause. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was a fight to reclaim everything he had stolen from me. I felt the cold steel of the handcuffs dig deeper into my wrists as Richard dragged me toward the door, his grip like a vice unrelenting. The deputies were behind me, shoving me forward each step, a bruise, each breath a struggle. My heart was pounding in my chest, the panic rising as I was marched toward an uncertain fate. But then something shifted inside me. I stopped fighting. I let go of the desperate resistance and let my body go limp, dead weight. It was a trick I'd learned years ago when I was younger, moving heavy furniture by myself. The sudden drop caught them off guard. The deputy to my left stumbled, his grip slipping as the force of my body weight pulled him off balance. For a moment, everything halted. Richard's hand yanked at my arm, his voice snarling at me. "Get up, you little brat." But I didn't move. I stayed limp like a rag doll and felt the deputy's hand slide off me entirely. I wasn't going anywhere, not like this, not without taking control of my own fate. I planted my feet firmly on the floor, feeling the cold, polished linoleum beneath me, the reality of the situation settling in. Richard was still barking orders, still treating me like some object he could throw around. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I didn't flinch. I didn't look down. I looked right at him, right into his eyes, and for the first time I saw him for what he was. A man who was desperately trying to hold on to power, trying to keep control of something that was slipping through his fingers. The fear that had once choked me into silence evaporated in an instant, replaced by a clarity I had never felt before. The victim was gone. The girl who had begged for scraps was no more. I was Noah Hayes now, not the mistake Richard had tried to bury. And for the first time, I knew it. I felt it in my bones. "Get up!" Richard shouted again, his voice raw with frustration. But this time I didn't get up. I stood tall, straightening my spine, and looked him dead in the eye. The deputy behind me started to panic, pulling at my arm, but I refused to be moved. I wasn't going to let them take me. Not without a fight, not without making them see that I wasn't going to bend to their will anymore. Richard's eyes narrowed as he watched me. For a brief moment, the mask slipped. I saw the crack in his composure, the realization that this time he wasn't in control. I wasn't the scared girl he could bully anymore. "Check the timestamp," I shouted. my voice cracking, but loud enough to cut through the noise. It was a gamble, a desperate play, but I had nothing left to lose. The confusion in the deputies' faces was the opening I needed. I locked eyes with Sterling, who was rushing toward us, and I pointed toward the security camera. Check the time he signed it. I yelled the words, tumbling out in a rush. The deputies hesitated, looking down at me, their grip on me loosening for just a split second. That was all I needed. Sterling was right behind them, his hand already reaching for his radio, the authority in his movement undeniable. "What's going on?" one of the deputies asked, unsure. "She's right," Sterling said, his voice sharp, demanding. "Check the timestamp on the warrant. It was signed this morning, but the security footage shows her entering the building at 7:45 a.m. It's a lie." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's eyes flickered for a brief moment, just a moment, but it was enough to tell me everything I needed to know. He was cornered. He had been cornered the whole time, and he knew it. He wasn't in charge here anymore. The deputies began to look at each other, their confusion shifting to doubt. Richard's grip tightened on the crumpled paper in his hands, and I could see the calculation in his eyes. He knew this was falling apart. He had no more tricks to play. The lie was unraveling piece by piece, and he could feel the ground beneath him slipping away. The tables had turned. I had stopped being a victim. I was no longer the girl who had been dragged around by Richard's cruelty. I wasn't someone who had to apologize for existing, for breathing, for taking up space. I was someone who was about to make him pay for everything he had done. The realization hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. For the first time, I understood the power I held. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't a mistake. I was someone who had been stolen, hidden away, but now I was taking back what was mine. I took a deep breath and looked Richard in the eye. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. "I'm not your prisoner anymore," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "You're done." Richard's face went pale, the last of his bravado draining from him like water through a sieve. The deputy's grip finally released me completely. I wasn't the one in chains anymore. I was free. The room seemed to hold its breath as Richard's world began to unravel. His face twisted with disbelief as Sterling held up the crumpled warrant, shaking it in front of him like a final judgment. Richard's hand trembled for a moment before he let out a bitter laugh. It was the kind of laugh someone gives when they know they've lost, but they refuse to admit it. "You think this is going to work?" he sneered. "I've been hiding this for years." But the truth was now undeniable. Sterling didn't hesitate, his voice cutting through Richard's bravado like a knife. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, fraud, and falsifying documents." Richard's expression faltered, his eyes darting around, looking for a way out that didn't exist. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a piece of paper, a legal document he tried to use to threaten his way out. But it was too late. The truth had already found him. "I've been holding on to this life for so long," Richard muttered, his voice now trembling. "You don't understand what I had to do to keep it all together." But Sterling was relentless, stepping forward with cuffs in hand. Richard in that moment realized he was no longer the one in control. His power, his grip on the situation was slipping away like sand through his fingers. It was a final admission, but it wasn't for anyone else. It was for him. He had known exactly what he was doing all along. He hadn't raised me, he had hidden me. He hadn't been my savior. He had been the one who stole my life, and now, here he was, caught cornered and with nowhere left to run. His past crimes, the manipulation, the lies were all out in the open for everyone to see. There was no escaping it now. His authority, his position as sheriff, meant nothing. It had all been built on lies. And now in front of everyone, it was all crumbling. I stood there watching. But it wasn't fear I felt. It wasn't panic. It was something else, something I had never allowed myself to feel before justice. I had fought so hard to believe I wasn't a mistake, that I was worthy of something better. And now, as Richard was led away in handcuffs, I understood. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I had been fighting for. I wasn't just reclaiming my life, I was reclaiming my identity. For the first time, I wasn't just a girl who had been lost. I was Noah Hayes. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was someone who had been stolen, hidden, and now I was free. The realization hit me all at once, like a weight lifting from my chest. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was taking back everything that had been taken from me. Richard's life, his power, meant nothing anymore. All the lies he had told, all the manipulation had fallen apart. And as I watched him being led away, the weight of all those years of fear and uncertainty finally started to fade. I was free. I had my life back, and nothing could take that away from me now. As the dust settled and the sound of Richard's departure faded into the background, I took a moment to stand still, breathing in the air around me. The chaos, the fear, the uncertainty, it was all behind me now. The weight of the past, the weight that had clung to me for so long was gone. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into that building. I wasn't the scared girl who had been hidden away, the one who had believed she didn't deserve more. I was Noah Hayes now, and for the first time I felt the freedom that had been waiting for me all along. I walked out of the federal building with my head held high, not just escaping the lies of my past, but stepping into a future where I could finally choose who I wanted to be. The world was mine to shape, and no one would control my destiny again. It wasn't the end of my journey, it was just the beginning. And as I took those first steps into the unknown, and I knew this was the moment I would always remember. The moment when I realized that nothing could define me but myself. If you've ever felt like you're stuck, like you're trapped in a life that wasn't meant for, you know that it's never too late to fight for who you truly are. Because just like me, you have the power to take control of your own story. If you believe in that, if you believe in the power of reclaiming your life, then maybe you'll want to stick around for more. Sometimes it only takes one moment to change everything, and that's the kind of story worth telling.